My nephew saw me wearing a miniskirt, then did this. A real infidelity story. Life has a strange way of putting you in unexpected circumstances, you know? I have a story, but I haven't told many people about it since it's complex. Have you ever felt like you're stuck between right and wrong? Not by your own doing, but because life places you in that position. That's exactly how I felt that day. As if the universe had a dark sense of humor, with me as the joke. It all began on a quiet Saturday afternoon. I wasn't doing anything remarkable, just tackling some lazy weekend chores. The house was still, save for the gentle hum of the dryer in the background. As I sifted through my closet, deciding what to donate, my hands landed on an old miniskirt. Now, to be clear, I don't usually wear things like that anymore. I thought I'd left that phase behind. But as I held it, a wave of nostalgia hit me. It was a piece from my younger days, a time when confidence felt effortless and life was all about fun and freedom. I decided to try it on a whim. Slipping it on, I didn't expect much, but when I caught my reflection in the mirror, I couldn't help but laugh. It was tighter than I remembered, clinging in ways both awkward and amusing. I was just fooling around, curious if it even fit, when I suddenly heard a knock at the door. Who could that be? I muttered under my breath. My hair was a mess. I wasn't exactly dressed to impress, and I absolutely wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my nephew David was standing there. David was no longer a child. At 24, he had filled out, with broad shoulders and a confident air about him, the kind of guy who could step into any room and immediately capture attention. He was holding a bag of tools, giving me that casual smile he always had. "Auntie Sarah, you called about the leaky faucet, remember?" "Oh, right. I'd completely forgotten. I'd asked him to come over and fix the sink in the guest bathroom. I laughed it off since I was a little self-conscious about my attire, but didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Then I said, "Yeah, come on in. The bathroom's down the hall." As he walked past me, I noticed him hesitate briefly, his eyes flicking toward me before quickly averting. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but there was something unusual in the atmosphere. David started working on the sink while I returned to my closet, yet an odd tension lingered in the air. It wasn't unpleasant, just unexpected. You know that sensation when someone's gaze lingers a moment too long, even if they're trying to be discreet? I shrugged it off as me overanalyzing. After all, he's my nephew. But as I passed by the bathroom on my way to the kitchen, David suddenly called out, "Hey, Auntie." "Yeah?" I replied. "Can you come here for a moment? I think I need some help." What occurred after that left me more bewildered than I'd ever been. As I entered the bathroom, I found David crouched near the sink, his sleeves rolled up to reveal his strong, sun-kissed arms. A wrench was in one hand, and he gestured toward the faucet with the other. "I think the pipe's stuck," he said, glancing up at me. "Can you hold this while I try to loosen it?" I nodded and leaned in to grip the faucet. The bathroom was cramped, really cramped, and before long, we were nearly shoulder to shoulder. I tried to ignore the closeness, but the warmth of his arm brushing against mine was impossible to miss as he worked. I stole a glance at him, and that's when I caught it. David wasn't just concentrating on the pipe. His eyes kept flickering toward me, as though he was trying to figure something out. It was subtle, something no one else would have noticed. But I did. "Everything okay?" I asked, breaking the silence. He turned to look at me, a brief hesitation crossing his face before he flashed his usual easygoing smile. "Yeah, just trying to make sure I don't mess up your sink." I let out a nervous laugh, hoping to dispel the sudden tension. "Well, you're the expert, right? No pressure at all." But as I spoke, I couldn't ignore the way his eyes stayed on me for a moment longer than usual. After a few minutes, he finally loosened the pipe and stood up, rubbing his hands on his jeans. "All done. It should work like new." "Thank you," I said, trying to keep it casual. "You're a lifesaver." He leaned against the counter, giving me a look I couldn't quite understand. "Auntie Sarah, I don't think I've ever seen you wear something like that before." "Yet?" I froze briefly, feeling my cheeks heat up. "This?" I let out an awkward laugh, fidgeting with the hem of the miniskirt. "Just something I dug out from the back of my closet. I was planning to donate it." David didn't respond right away, his gaze lingering on me with an unreadable expression. Then he smiled, but there was something different about it this time, almost like he knew something I didn't. "Well, it suits you," he said, his tone softer than usual. I wasn't sure how to reply. Thanks," I muttered as I felt shame. In an attempt to put some distance between us, I turned to exit the bathroom fast, but David was right behind me. His words, "Auntie," stopped me in the hallway. With my heart racing, I turned to look at him. "Yeah?" He paused, as if he was trying to find the proper words. "You ever feel like something's happened for a reason?" "What do you mean?" Sincerely perplexed, I inquired. He was about to say something, but he laughed it off and shook his head. Never mind, forget I said anything. However, I couldn't forget his tone of speech, or the way he stared at me. Long after he departed that day, it continued to haunt me. That evening I was lying on the couch, aimlessly flipping through channels, trying to shake off the awkwardness from earlier. I kept reassuring myself it was nothing, that I was just overthinking. After all, David was family. Just as I started to feel a bit more at ease, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I reached over to grab it, and there it was. A message from David. "Hey, Auntie Sarah, can I ask you something?" I stared at the screen, hesitating about whether to reply. Something about the timing felt off. Why was he texting me now? After a brief pause, I typed back, "Of course. What's on your mind?" His reply came almost instantly. "I keep thinking about today. You looked different. It caught me off guard, I guess." My stomach flipped slightly. What was he trying to say? My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I mulled over how to respond. Eventually, I went with something neutral. "Oh, I was just trying on some old clothes, nothing special." I read my message immediately. I saw the typing bubble appear, but it took him a moment to respond. When his message finally came through, it completely threw me off. "You looked really good." "I mean it." My father silently answered. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Was this just an innocent compliment, or was there something deeper behind it? I wasn't sure how to feel, let alone how to respond. After what seemed like an eternity, I finally typed, "Thanks, David. That's kind of you to say." I hoped that would settle things, but deep down, I suspected it wouldn't. His reply came quickly. "I don't know if I should say this, but I felt something today. Did you?" Either way, I didn't respond right away. The typing bubble popped up again. "Forget I said that. I don't want to make things weird." I exhaled shakily, a mix of relief and unease washing over me. I'd convinced myself it was just a misunderstanding, that he'd move on and everything would return to normal. But as I set my phone down, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that this was far from over. The following morning, as I began my day with a cup of coffee in hand and my hair still disheveled, a sudden knock at the door startled me. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there he was. David stood on the doorstep, hands tucked into his pockets, exuding his usual casual vibe. Yet something was off. His carefree smile was absent, replaced by a serious expression I didn't recognize. "David," I murmured, attempting to hide my astonishment. "Why are you here at such an early hour?" Without waiting for an invitation, he shrugged and entered. "I decided to drop by while I was in the area." It was a weak justification. I didn't confront David about the fact that he didn't reside in my area. Rather, I followed him into the living room and shut the door. Leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees, he took a seat on the couch. The tension was thick and unsaid, and I could feel it in the air. "What road is this? Is everything all right?" I sat down opposite him and inquired. His gaze searched mine as he glanced up at me. "I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable about last night." I breathed a little sigh of satisfaction that he was taking care of it. "It's okay, David. Let's just move past this, all right?" But he shook his head firmly. "I can't just move on, Auntie. I meant every word I said." I froze, unsure of how to react. This wasn't how the family was supposed to communicate. "David," I started cautiously, "I think you're mistaken. Whatever you're feeling, it's not real. It's just—" "It is real," he cut me off, his voice steady but not harsh. "I know it's wrong, and I've been trying to suppress it, but I can't stop thinking about you." My heart pounded as a whirlwind of emotions surged through me. Shock, confusion, and even a trace of guilt. How had things come to this? "David," I said, my voice shaky, "you have to put an end to this. You're my nephew. This isn't right." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the floor. I know it's wrong, but I had to tell you how I feel. Keeping it bottled up was driving me insane." The room was still, the only sound being the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I was at a loss for words, unsure how to mend this or if it was even possible. Finally, I rose to my feet, feeling the need to create some distance. "David, I think you should go. We both need time to process this." His eyes met mine, filled with a mix of regret and yearning. "Okay," he murmured, "but this conversation isn't over." Without another word, he walked out, and as the door clicked shut behind him, I felt a blend of relief and a persistent uneasiness. The evening sun stretched long shadows across the living room, and that's when I noticed the corner of an envelope sticking out from beneath the front door. As I approached, my chest grew tight, already certain of who it was from before I even touched it. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper, my heart beat thundering in my ears. The handwriting was undeniably David's, precise and intentional, as though every word had been weighed carefully. The note read, "Auntie Sarah, I understand you asked me to leave, and I respect that, but I can't ignore these feelings. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. If you want me to stay away, say the word, and I'll never trouble you again. But if even the smallest part of you feels the same, please let me know. I'll be waiting." I stood frozen, staring at the words, torn between anger, unease, and an odd sense of flattery. A whirlwind of thoughts consumed me. Was he serious? Could he truly feel this way? And why couldn't I dismiss it outright? I folded the note and shoved it into a drawer, hiding it from view, though it lingered heavily in my mind. I told myself I wouldn't reply, and that silence was the best option. Yet deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Later that night, as I tried to fall asleep, my phone rang again. It was David. "David, I know I promised not to bother you, but I need to ask, did you get my note?" I stared at the message, unsure whether to respond. After a moment of hesitation, I finally typed, "Yes, I got it, but David, this needs to end. It's not healthy for either of us." His reply came almost immediately. "If you want me to stop, I will. Just be honest with you. Do you feel anything for me, even a little?" My fingers hovered over the screen. How could I respond? Acknowledging anything would only complicate things further, but Denying it felt insincere. At last I replied, "David, you're my nephew. That's all I can say." It wasn't the answer he looked for, but it was the only one I could give. I went to work the following morning, ready to forget about all that had transpired. My workplace served as a haven where I could concentrate on my work and put my personal issues aside. However, I had a strange feeling that someone was observing me while I sorted through emails at my workstation. I froze when I looked up. David appeared torn but resolute as he stood just outside the office window, with his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. "Well's he in this place?" I whispered to myself as my chest constricted. I hastily excused myself, leaving before he could enter and exacerbate the situation. I tried to speak steadily as I said, "David, what are you doing here?" "I had to see you," he remarked in a quiet but sincere voice. "David, I have informed you that this is unhealthy, but you didn't respond to my inquiry last night. This conversation cannot continue." "But you didn't deny it," he murmured, taking a step forward. "You didn't say you have no feelings at all." I took a small step back, my fingers tightening around the strap of my bag. "This isn't about emotions, David. It's about right and wrong. And this, whatever you think this is, it's not right." He exhaled deeply, dragging a hand through his hair. "I know it's wrong. I've told myself that over and over, but I can't help how I feel." His words lingered in the air, heavy and disquieting. Unsure of what to say, I turned to leave. "Please wait," he said, his hand catching my arm gently but firmly. I froze, my gaze dropping to where his hand rested before meeting his eyes. There was a rawness in his expression, a vulnerability that made it almost impossible to simply walk away. "I don't want to ruin your life or make your life more difficult," he stated softly. I must know whether there is any hope at all. Otherwise, I'll vanish. You won't have to see me ever again." His remarks were like a kick to the stomach. My heart ached at the idea of him severing all contact. But I realized that allowing this to go on would only cause us both additional suffering. "Your family, David," I murmured, my voice shaking. "This can only ever be that." His shoulders slumped in disappointment as he nodded slowly. "All right," he responded, taking a step back. "I hear you. I'm going to leave you alone." When I saw him walk away, a strange blend of relief and sorrow washed over me. I thought it was over, that we could finally move forward. But later that night, a phone call shattered that illusion. David had been in an accident, and when I reached the hospital, his words changed everything. The call came late in the evening, just as I was winding down for the night. My phone vibrated persistently on the coffee table, and the sight of David's name on the screen made my stomach twist. But it wasn't David's voice I heard on the other end. "This is Mercy General," stated a woman's voice urgently. "Your nephew has been in an accident. He's requesting you." I was filled with panic. I snatched up my keys and hurried out the door without waiting for more information. My heart was pounding when I got to the hospital. I rushed through the emergency room's swinging doors and looked around the room until I spotted him. David was on a bed with his arm in a sling and a minor cut on his forehead. As I got closer, his face went pale, but his eyes retained that familiar intensity as he glanced up. "What happened?" I asked, my voice tinged with concern. He gave a faint smile. "It's not a big deal, just a small accident." "David," I said, frustration lacing my tone. "You had me so worried." He let out a quiet laugh, but winced, holding his side. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call." I exhaled deeply, pulling up a chair next to his bed. "All right, I'm here now. Are you really okay?" He nodded, his expression softening. "Yeah, but there's something I need to tell you." David, this isn't the right moment. It is, he cut in, his voice calm despite the raw emotion in his eyes. I didn't reach out just because of the accident. I called because I realized something important. I narrowed my eyes, uncertain of where he was heading. What do you mean? He glanced down at his hands, nervously playing with the edge of the hospital blanket. When I thought I might not survive, all I could think about was you. How much I care about you, how badly I've messed things up, and how I can't bear the thought of losing you. Her last words to him before dying. David, I started, but he raised a hand to stop me. Please, just let me say this, he begged, his voice almost pleading. I know I've crossed boundaries, and I despise myself for it. But this isn't just some fleeting feeling for me. I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone. And I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. His words lingered in the air, raw and weighted. I was at a loss for how to respond. A part of me wanted to reassure him, to say everything would be fine. But another part knew this wasn't something a few comforting words could resolve. Exercise. Before I could reply, a nurse stepped into the room, cutting through the tension. Visiting hours are over, she announced, with a polite yet firm smile. I got to my feet, feeling a mix of relief and unease. Get some rest, David. We'll talk about this another time. He nodded, his gaze locked on mine as I left the room. On the drive home, his words kept running through my head. I thought walking away was the right choice, but when I arrived home, something was waiting for me that made me doubt everything. As I parked in the driveway, the house seemed unnaturally quiet. As soon as I kicked off my shoes and entered the house, I saw a tiny parcel with my name written in David's handwriting on the kitchen table. With my hands shaking a little, I opened it after hesitating. There was a little photo book and a message inside. Auntie, I know you asked me to stop, but even if this is our final conversation, I need to explain everything, even if it's the last time we talk. Please read this and look through the album. After that, if you want me out of your life, I'll respect your wishes. I fully opened the letter, my eyes moving over the words. Since the moment I returned here, I sensed something different about you. At first, I couldn't quite place it. I assumed it was admiration or respect, but as time passed, I realized it was much more. I understand how this might sound, and I've tried to suppress it, but I can't change how I feel. You've been there for me in ways no one else ever has. You've seen me at my lowest and still cared. That's not something I take lightly. I stopped for a moment, my heart racing. The weight of his confession was overwhelming, but I continued reading. I created this album as a way to remind myself of everything I cherish about you. Not to overstep boundaries, but to process my emotions. Inside, you'll find photos of us at family events, moments where you were laughing or simply being yourself. I'm sharing this with you because I don't want to keep this hidden anymore. I'll honor whatever decision you make, but I couldn't let this go unspoken. Putting the letter aside, I started to open the album. The images seemed familiar. Holiday feasts, family cookouts, and sporadic pictures I couldn't even recall being taken. A little remark in David's handwriting accompanied each one, highlighting specifics he valued, such as how joyful I seemed, how considerate I was of others, and how much he respected my strength. Tears filled my eyes. The emotions were overwhelming, both profoundly moving and deeply unsettling. I shut the album and sat quietly for a long time, struggling to make sense of it all. David wasn't just expressing a fleeting crush. He was exposing his soul in a way that couldn't be ignored. But what could I do? I couldn't encourage him, not only because it was wrong, but because it would tear our family apart. Yet completely shutting him out felt equally heartless, considering the pain he was so clearly enduring. Today we are disconnected from other human beings, he said. Before I could figure out what to do, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from David. "Did you get the package? I just need to know you've read it. If you want me to leave, say the word, and I'll be gone by tomorrow." I looked at his message for what felt like forever, my heart and mind locked in a battle I couldn't control. He had placed the decision entirely in my hands, leaving me to choose something that could alter both our lives and our family forever. Finally, I typed back, "David, come by tomorrow. We need to talk." The next morning, he arrived on time, his demeanor a mix of nervousness and hope. I welcomed him in and we sat facing each other in the living room, the silence between us thick with unspoken emotions. "David," I started, my tone steady yet kind. "I read the letter and went through the album. I can tell how much thought and effort you put into it, and I won't deny that it moved me. But we need to establish some boundaries." "Eagle, for both your sake and mine," he nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "I understand. I just needed you to know how I feel, that's all." "No," I replied, leaning forward slightly. "I need you to understand that I love you too, but as family. That's where it starts and ends. The feelings you have for me stem from admiration and gratitude, and that's perfectly natural. But we can't mistake those feelings for something more. It would only bring pain to both of us in the end." He dropped his gaze to his hands, his face reflecting a mix of relief and sadness. "Get it," he murmured. "I don't want to lose you, Auntie. I'll work on letting this go." I reached out, gently squeezing his hand as a gesture of reassurance. "You're not going to lose me, David. However, you need to take some time to understand what's truly going on in your heart. Maybe consider talking to someone who can help you sort through these feelings." He nodded once more, and for the first time in days, I caught a glimpse of peace in his eyes. We stayed there a little longer, shifting the conversation to lighter topics, his future plans, and his desire to focus on his career and hobbies. By the time he left, I felt a sense of relief, even though things weren't entirely back to normal. David stayed true to his word. He gave us both some space, dedicating time to himself and seeking guidance to work through his emotions. Gradually, our relationship returned to something closer to what it had been: supportive, familial, and free from confusion. It wasn't an easy journey, but we both grew from the experience and learned the value of setting boundaries and addressing issues directly, while David gained clarity and a stronger sense of self, independent of others. Reflecting on it now, I'm thankful we were able to navigate such a challenging time without losing the relationship that meant the most: family. That's the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you found our content engaging, a thumbs up and sharing it with your loved ones would be much appreciated. Make sure to subscribe to Love 30K Stories and turn on the notification bell for updates on our latest videos. Your support is everything to us. Until next time, take care and goodbye.